Hello everyone, I am so happy to be back with new episodes of Blueprint. I wanted to make some quick announcements with some good news about how I'm going to run the podcast from season 5 and beyond. So here's the deal. I'm now editing this show on my own, which is both exciting and daunting. I've geeked out for a while, I've learned a whole bunch about audio production, and I'm certainly no podcast editing professional. What that means in the short term is there may be some rough edges and things like that while I nail down my production workflow, so forgive me if those things show up. However, in this season and in the longer term, there should be some significant improvements. My plan is to dramatically improve the production value of the show for you, both in audio quality and stylistically. So the podcast will feel a little bit different this season, but hopefully in the best of ways. The other thing that means is that I have to fit editing into my already busy schedule, which is hard to do if I want to release an entire season of episodes, given the amount of work that entails. So here's what's going to happen. Starting now, I'm going to make a switch and get rid of the idea of seasons for the podcast and start labeling episodes with sequential numbering, and we'll be releasing episodes whenever I can find, record, and edit them. That should allow me to consistently get more episodes out to you, since I won't have to wait for a huge block of time to produce an entire season of episodes, which is what held this season up, so I'm getting rid of that. What you should expect going forward is a less regular cadence of release with many more episodes spread out over the entire year. So be sure to stay subscribed to Blueprint on your podcast app of choice, as you never know when a new episode may drop. And of course, I'll be announcing them on LinkedIn and other social media along the way. So follow me and Sans to be sure you don't miss any of those. I know an irregular episode release cadence is not ideal for the podcast world, but shifting to that will allow me to keep producing episodes weaved into my irregular work and teaching schedule. Since I'm constantly meeting interesting people in class, my plan is to start recording these episodes on the road in person when I can. I built a recording kit that I now travel around with to Sans events and can't wait to start using it more. If you ever end up in an event where I'm teaching and you have something you'd like to share, come say hi. I'm always looking for stories, experiences, research, or anyone with a useful lesson to teach security ops practitioners. For example, I'm going to be teaching LDR 551, Building and Leading Security Operations Centers in Dubai at our November training event there, and Sec 450, Blue Team Fundamentals, in Washington, D.C. at our major Sans CDI event on December 13th through 18th, 2024. I'd love to meet and record with some of you if you get a chance to attend, so be sure to say hi if you're going to be at one of those events. Even if we aren't at an event, I'm always happy to record episodes remotely as well, so don't be shy. Shoot me over an episode idea on LinkedIn or otherwise, and we can collaborate that way as well. I couldn't do this podcast without all of you out there, so a huge thank you for all those guests that I've talked to that have helped me build the podcast to this point. And to the rest of you, I can't wait to meet you for a future episode. So to kick off this new season, something new that I hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening. I'm excited to see where this new chapter of Blueprint takes us. So we've all probably been in that situation before where you realized, oh no, it's my friend's birthday and I don't have time to buy a gift. You want to get your friend something special, but you may not know what specifically to get them. But of course, being your friend, you know where they shop, so you make the obvious choice. You get them a gift card, right? You head out to the store, purchase the card, and then boom, problem solved. But how frustrating would it be if, after buying that card, all of a sudden your friend tries to use it and then there's nothing on it? Your simple gesture turns into a nightmare of potential phone calls trying to explain to some customer support line that you didn't actually spend the money, and you know they're not going to be hearing it, and of course probably aren't going to believe you and hang up on you. There goes that great gift idea. Well, while doing research for this season of Blueprint, I ran into a story of just such a scenario, and in this case, we're going to get to go behind the scenes with the security operations team and see how they took apart a gift card fraud scheme, and see how the organization responded and made sure it never happened again. Welcome to Season 5 of the Blueprint Podcast.
So my name is Mark Jeanmougin. I've been teaching with the SANS Institute for, I think, 7 years now, or 7 years in July, on and off. Specialize in the cyber defense program. So I teach the 511 and the 450 classes, which deal with incident detection, incident response, security operations, how to optimize your security operations center. I've also been involved with what we now call cybersecurity since 2000. So was at one of my client sites, and the director of information security pulled me down into his office and had an incident that he wanted to talk to me about. He pulled me in the office and says that there's a retailer that is having some gift card fraud. At one of these stores, people were showing up with their gift cards that grandma got them, and they were trying to buy a new pair of shoes or whatever. And the gift cards had zero balance on it. I'm kind of looking at the director going, what does this have to do with, like, how can I help you? This sounds terrible. What can I do? And they're like, Mark, you idiot. We sell the gift cards. Every store in the mall doesn't have their own group that handles gift cards. We handle that for them. And I'm like, really? That's a line of business? And we're like, yeah. Before I left to go talk to him, I had let my lead analyst know, hey, go ahead and pull everybody else into conference room J. I went down and talked to my team in the conference room. Was like, okay, here's the situation. And I told him what I found out from the director. I said, we're going to have a directory out on the shared drive that's locked down just to our team and the web developers. They're going to stick a copy of the logs there, and we've got to see what we can find out. These are logs that we've never seen before. We're not going to know what the format is for the logs. We're not going to have parsers for the logs. They're not going to be in the SIM. This is just us trying to look at them and see what we can figure out, see if we can interpret them, and then kind of figure out, like, how bad is this? I said, hey, as we're doing this, what's one of the old sayings for digital forensics? If you're moving too fast to make notes, you're moving too fast. So let's make sure that we're keeping notes. We know what we're doing. We know why we're doing it. There's a decent chance that lawyers will get involved at some point. One of my rules of thumb is a different analyst from the other side of the aisle in a courtroom. If they have your notes and your data, they should only be able to come to your conclusions. So make sure that you're documenting everything in your notes. Make sure that you've got all that there. And basically be ready for an adversarial examination of whatever it is that we do today as we're figuring this out. So I get in touch with some of the application developers, and it turns out that the website listed on the back of the card was, I'm exaggerating here, but it was basically written by like an intern 5 years ago. The line of business didn't generate enough revenue for there to be really an owner for that system. It's just, it's ran in the background. It was in our asset inventory. So once a month, one of the sysadmins would SSH to the box and apply all the updates, reboot the box, come back. It wasn't sending logs to the SIM. It wasn't in any kind of monitoring setup. Like, it was literally just I don't even know if it was a VM. It may as well have been like somebody's old desktop that then they drove to the data center and stuck in a cage.
This is definitely the starting story we see for a lot of breach scenarios. I'm sure you've heard defenders say before, if you don't know it exists, you can't defend it. Well, that's totally true. And it's absolutely essential you have a system to keep track of what is actually running on your network as both hardware and software. Once Mark and his team knew the server existed on the network and might be having problems, I asked them about what they did and what they found on that server when they went to it.
Just a Linux box running one of the enterprise Linuxes with long-term service contracts. So like I said, it was probably Apache or Nginx or something like that. It's basically a little front-end web server that makes a call to the back-end systems that are responsible for keeping track of the balance. I mean, it really is something simple enough for an intern to write the code for. So it presents a web front end to the user. They put in their card number and PIN. It does a network call to say, what's the balance on this? Is there a transaction history? It downloads all that data via the API from the backend system, puts together a little web page. If you've used gift cards, you've seen something similar. And yeah, if the number and PIN don't match, then it gives you a little error message and prompts you to put in a different gift card number and PIN to try again. But yeah, it was a very simple system. It's like this box could have caught on fire and it would have not impacted people's ability to purchase new gift cards, use what they already had. It was purely for like customer checking their balances.
Okay, so then you went to the server, you knew which one it was, and you knew what it did, and you knew that there wasn't a whole ton of attention being paid to it. What do you do to make an evidence package of sorts? What kind of logs are you pulling from a system like that?
So we were lucky in that the way the customer service chain of events worked, each of my clients' clients had a customer service person to talk to. And so it started with retailer getting in touch with their sales team, their customer support team, saying, hey, we're seeing some weird stuff, working it through. And then by the time it got to the SOC, it had already been to the development team that was responsible for that. So they basically had a archive of logs for us at the same time that my director was letting me know what was going on. So the logs that we had, it was basically like access logs from Apache.
What's the type of information that you would be looking for in this scenario in an Apache access log or Nginx? And if you recall, what did you find in those logs on that server?
The access logs from the web server were a gold mine in terms of understanding what was adversary activity and what was legitimate customer activity. In those Apache access logs, you've got information like source IP address, time date stamp, the HTTP method. So is it a GET? Is it a post? Is it a delete? Is it a head? Is it whatever? And then the URI. So the directory file name, and then optional ampersand and key value pairs to complete things. And then user agent string, file size, then your HTTP code. So like 200 is okay, 404 is error not found, 451, whatever. I told you that was a gold mine. So why was it a gold mine? What we were able to do is start looking at the logs, and we were able to figure out what a normal transaction looked like. So end user connects to an IP address we had never seen before, connects to the server, they get an index.html or something with the welcome page. They click through to balancecheck.php or whatever. And then there's I think it was then a post. And then the results from the post included a file size. And where things got interesting is that by looking at the number of bytes in that returned code, you could figure out, was this a successful login with a card number that had like 0 transactions, a successful login with a card number that had a few transactions, or the file size was large, then it was the failed page and then prompting the user to put it in again. So basically by focusing on those post log entries and looking at the file sizes, we could figure out, was that successful or unsuccessful. The attacker was randomizing their user agent string, and it was like they didn't work hard at it. It was like they Googled most popular user agent strings and then just grabbed 5 of them or 100 of them or whatever. They were smart enough not to do it from their home machine, which was good, but they weren't working real hard at it. Like, this wasn't a adversary that had access to a botnet with 1,000 compromised machines or anything like that. If I remember right, they were using one of the like low cost cloud service companies. So not like AWS, but it's also not like they were coming from the Russian business network or someplace over there. Honestly, it kind of felt like that kid that figured out he could, steal a pack of smokes from the local store and then sell them to his buddies, and then realized that lots of his buddies were willing to buy a pack of smokes off of him, rather than like a hardcore criminal. It was more than just a script kiddie, because he figured out he could make some money on this, but it's also like it was a dude in their basement. It's not someone that was really a hardcore professional. I know from looking at the access logs, we could figure out this is an adversary transaction or this is likely a legitimate customer transaction. We were able to put together a list of card numbers that were likely viewed by the adversary. I'll say it that way. We just knew, hey, we have this theory of a pattern of what looks malicious, and these match the pattern, so these are probably part of the incident. So gift card numbers follow the same pattern as credit card numbers. So what a lot of people don't realize, on a 16-digit credit card number, the first six deal with like, is it a Visa card? Is it a MasterCard? Is it Discover, Amex, some other stuff? And then the last digit is a checksum. So you've got 16-digit card number, 6 at the front, 1 at the back. 16 minus 6 minus 1 is 9. So you've got 9 digits there in the middle. So the really cool thing was we were able to trace this back. And basically the adversary got a gift card, went to the website, checked the balance, did his thing. And so he starts by looking at definitely a totally legit gift card number. And then eventually he starts doing some guessing and starts guessing other card numbers. So basically it's educated guesses, looking at numbers that were above his and below his numerically, and then kind of figuring out what worked. And then it was over the next couple of weeks that he realized that he could exploit this and start making some money from it, because it was so specific about how they were coming in. There was no remote code execution or anything like that. We didn't have to think about them moving laterally throughout the environment or anything like that.
Did the website indicate in some way when you typed in a correct number versus an incorrect number, or was there just an assumption every number is a card?
The checksum algorithm is called a LUN check, LUHN. So if you take a 16-digit number and you can run it through the LUN algorithm, and it'll tell you this is a valid credit, it passes a LUN check or it fails a LUN check. Now, not every number that passes a LUN check is a valid credit card number. So he was using numbers that passed the LUN check, but sometimes he would go from a pin of 0000 through pin of 9999. And if they all failed, then he would just go on to the next number. And he was doing this over, I want to say it was a period of weeks where he was able to gather. I think we found more than 20, but less than 200 numbers. For this vendor, I think a big gift card for them was like $150. So like now you can go get an Amazon gift card for $500 or $2,000. Like, no, it wasn't anything like that. And most of your gift cards are $10, $25. So it's not like he's making money hand over fist here.
So you figure out what's going on here. You get the data from the people in the SOC. You go back to the security director. What's the reaction there?
First off was good work. We were able to find some things that he did not expect us to find, so that was good. He was impressed that we were able to put together the list of likely compromised cards. He did not expect us to get that, so he was very happy about that. The second thing was he wanted us to validate that. So I'm like, well, how would we validate that? So he goes, well, go to one of those sites where you can buy gift cards and buy a handful of cards from that site, and let's cross-reference them to the list that you've got and see if you get any hits. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I go to the site, pull out the corporate card. Thankfully, I didn't use my personal card. Bought, 4 or 5 different, basically some of the cheapest ones that I could find. I think all of them were on the list. About 6 months later, I realized that my boss asked me to purchase potentially stolen goods over the internet. I was young and dumb at the time, so not my smartest move. But yeah, it was kind of cool to be able to go full circle, and also meant that we took those card numbers out of circulation. So, nobody else was going to be able to get those. And then the original people that had those cards, they'd still work because we didn't use them.
Okay, so you had a good idea of how this attack worked. What's the next step you take once you kind of figure out what's going on?
So the developers were already starting on the CAPTCHA to try to prevent future similar activity. And can you automate some of that? Can you do some OCR? Can you do some whatever? Yeah, especially once we dove into it. This wasn't a sophisticated adversary. I'm sure once we cut this off, the adversary just went back to playing World of Warcraft or whatever in the evenings instead. We took down the app and basically then brought it back up with the CAPTCHA in place. The CAPTCHA was something that could be done I don't want to say without going through change control, but it was a little easier for the devs to put that in place and do a midday push where if you've got a WAF that sits in front of multiple websites, you're making a config update, and that gets a little weirder. We already had WAFs in the organization, so we've already made that capital investment. And I feel like I think that was on the lessons learned from the incident response, actually, was adding it to the WAF. So like, as we're going through this, there were definitely people in the SOC that were like, how did we not have CAPTCHA already? How did we not have rate limiting? How did we not have a WAF? How do we should be, blah, blah, blah. And then you had other people were like, dude, those kinds of technologies, that's going to cost like $5,000, $50,000 to put that kind of protection in place. Like, that's all, like, we don't have that much revenue selling these gift cards. Like, it got to some neat conversations about the balance between the company does not exist purely to be secure and, what level of protection is appropriate.
Getting that system back into a place where it was validated, known about, logged. What did you do to make that a more legitimate system in the future?
So step number one was restoring service, which is understandable, but always a little disappointing. Step number two was that we were going to make sure that it had the full suite of security controls, that it was sending all of its logs to where it needed to go. The monitoring team was going to add an entry to make sure that was in monitoring. We were going to do a cross-reference of what systems were sending logs into the SIM and compare that to our asset database to see if we had any other systems like this. Basically, it was the chapter 1, chapter 2 kind of stuff, making sure it's in the asset inventory database, making sure that everything that should be done on every system was done. And again, it's a very low volume product for the organization. So as much as we wanted to say, hey, let's have Carl spend all of next week putting in a custom WAF rule in place on this thing. Carl was not the highest paid person on the team, but even a week's worth of Carl's time, like, we couldn't cross-charge for that. So no, it would not have made sense.
Aside from the CAPTCHA, what other things could have potentially caught this in the act if you were to go back and retroactively apply detections to try to catch this kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely rate limiting would have been the big one. And I think that this idea of where can I put rate limiting? What are the things I really care about? And having some special alerts on that, which kind of is a special case of the data classification, right? So I think, rate limiting is definitely one that I would put in place, and some additional detections on that. One thing that we did do is we noticed that the adversary in this case was coming from, like I said, one of these low-cost hosting providers. So we went and said, okay, let's add an additional piece of metadata to all these logs, which is the ASN. So what networks is this traffic coming from? And the vast majority of it, probably like over 90%, was home internet providers, Verizon, AT&T, things like that. No one is setting up an AWS instance to check their, gift card numbers. We looked through our logs, validated that we didn't have any traffic coming from that, and then we're able to put blocks in for that as well. And so what can we do to make the adversary work just that little bit harder? I'm a firm believer that every prevention is a detection. So if we've got a simple rate limit and they trip over it, okay, now I've got a detection. I've got an alert for my SOC, something else to look at. And those low fidelity alerts, those low fidelity blocks, are you really going to spend 3 hours investigating every one? No, definitely not. But those can be there in your kind of database of historical information so that if you get a new alert that happens to have the same IP or some other way to correlate, now you're able to bring in some of that historical contextual information and say, okay, this isn't just the only bad thing we've ever seen from this IP address. Now we've got some other rich information to say, hey, maybe we got something bad going on here.
If you were to wrap up kind of the core issues, like the root cause of this, any sort of revelations that can be generalized to the average organization here?
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're enjoying this episode, then you're undoubtedly interested in building the strongest security operations team that you can. For those who want to go even deeper, did you know that SANS has not one, but 2 courses that cover security operations centers as well? For the leaders, managers, and directors out there, my co-author Mark Orlando and I offer 551, Building and Leading Security Operations Centers. This course covers building your team, your physical and virtual workspace, getting the right data into your tools, and then focusing on security priorities through everyday execution of important security tasks and building the best SOC team possible. For the technical practitioners out there, my course Sec 450, Blue Team Fundamentals, Security Operations and Analysis is designed to cover everything you need to jump in being the best SOC analyst that you can be. We cover important data types, SOC tools, security logs, malware, analysis technique, automation, and much, much more. In addition, if you want to prove you can deliver the best on any security team, both courses have an accompanying certification available from GIAC. That's the GSOM for 551 and the GSOC for 450. Check out both courses and free demos available on the SANS website. You can get registered today for an in-person course at one of our many events, or go to On Demand and take either class anywhere at your own pace. Thanks for listening.
So the first thing I would say is everything in your org needs a little bit of cyber defense love. Those systems that have your, fancy EDR and the fancy this and the adversary detection 9000 software, whatever, good, great, awesome, keep it up, do the thing. But if you have a weak spot in your environment, that's where the crack's going to be. Whatever is the weakest link in the chain, eventually an adversary is going to find this, because we used to talk about what infinite number of monkeys on an infinite number of typewriters would eventually generate Shakespeare. So the internet is that infinite number of monkeys. The problem is they're not monkeys. They're actually adversaries that are trying to figure out how to profit. So they're going to find those weak spots in your armor and they're going to go after it. You may have your Active Directory domain controllers that are super locked down and very tight, and that's awesome. But if you put all of your eggs in that basket and then don't patch your Red Hat 7 boxes that are on the internet, or don't patch your HVAC control systems, or whatever it is, the adversaries are going to find it. So balance things out. It got to some neat conversations about the balance between the company does not exist purely to be secure, and what level of protection is appropriate, and putting the captures in very cheap. And it became this really good teaching moment of understanding that it's our job to kind of protect the organization. And even though in class we talk about know thy network, we can go and grab the CIS controls and hardware inventory, software inventory. We're supposed to have all that, but do we? And how many organizations really do? I've had clients throughout my career where if you ask them for a list of all their point of presence, like all their internet connections, they don't know that. I've had clients that don't even know where all their data centers are. But there was definitely some people that were frustrated that the logs weren't already going into the SIM. There were some people that kind of had that perspective of, well, if it's not in the SIM, then it didn't happen. Like I searched for the logs and nothing came up, so there's not an incident. And so the idea of understanding there's this one web server, dude, that's just life in the SOC. One of the things I'll talk about when I teach in class is the most interesting career incidents you're going to work in your career, those things that you're going to talk to people about, the things that really get you excited, that's never going to be for a system that is properly configured, has all of its agents, is up to date, is in the inventory, is sending all its logs to the SOC. No, it's going to be that box that Carl set up 3 weeks before he retired, and then his office became a storage locker, and nobody knew that this box was there, but somehow it's generating $30,000 in revenue every week. So you never know, and you never know what you're going to get to see. What else would I say? Don't be afraid. And that's something that I really see in some of my clients, where they'll get a little tense. They'll get a little jittery because, oh, I've never seen this log before, or it's not in the SIM, or it's in the SIM, but it's not parsed. You've got to be able to play the hand you're dealt. And whatever kind of information that you've got in order to detect adversary information, use what you got. You're playing the adversary's game. In defense, whether you're playing basketball, soccer, football, whatever, you got to react to what the offense is doing. And if the offense is going to attack your website that was written by an intern, then hey, that's what you got to defend. And like I said, those are the most fun incidents you're going to work in your career. Along the lines of don't be scared. So this broke at like 9 or 9:30 in the morning, I think. And I basically told the team, we're going to be in conference room J. I need you to clear the schedule. Anybody else that's in that room, that's our war room. Kick them out, have them reschedule. We're going to be in there until further notice. Number one. Number two, I want a bucket of KFC delivered every 4 hours starting at 11 a.m. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how long we're going to be here. And I say that partially in jest, but feed people. It's really easy for people to get hangry. It's really easy for people to get on each other's nerves. So make sure that you're feeding people. I said, we may at like 3:00 have to start making some decisions here. So if this is going to be an incident that we have to work 24/7, then I'll probably be sending some people home so that they can then come back at midnight. And then the other people, you're just going to work until midnight. Second shift's going to come in. And if we need to, we're going to do that kind of stuff. I like to say you've got to put something in the account before you can make a withdrawal. So if you're going to ask people to work late or do something weird like that, you better have put some money in that account before you're asking them to do that. So like there was one person on the team that if it was like a sunny day, they wanted to spend the day working from home. And by working from home, I mean they were going to be out in their backyard, laying out in the sun, enjoying a cold, frosty beverage. Maybe the laptop would go into power save mode and they'd forget about it. And I was totally cool with that because like that was me putting those deposits in the bank, because then I knew that if I asked that person to work crazy hours, they would recognize that, yeah, that was totally cool. So, really take care of your people and those little kind of things here and there. This was prior to everybody doing remote work, but I'd just buy them lunch once a month. And that kind of little stuff like that went a long way. One of the other managers gave me a hard time about that. And so I pulled up the appropriate policy and find out as a manager I was allowed to do this. What was the problem? Policy had a paragraph about alcohol. And one of my rules was that Mark doesn't buy alcohol. The problem was in the policy, Mark was allowed to buy alcohol. So it went from one of the managers being mad that Mark would buy his team lunch to now not only is Mark buying his team lunch, but then he's buying no more than one drink at lunch for everyone as well.
Awesome.
It was a fun team. It was a good org.
Yeah, I like those points. I'm always a big proponent of making the team a fun place to work, right? I'm, you know, I'm very focused on minimizing turnover and maximizing retention and people's experience in the SOC, because a happy person in the SOC is someone who's want to stay there, do better work, right? And ultimately make the organization more secure. So yeah, glad to have that in there.
We could talk all about that kind of stuff for probably another hour. Yeah, I got some stories there too. One involving a garbage bag of marijuana, but that's for a different day.
Mark on it coming up soon.
Yeah.
The garbage bag episode. Yeah. One of the things I'm always thinking about is every problem is an opportunity. Where's the opportunity in this scenario? And I know that in this particular incident, you were inspired to create a potential opportunity for students. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
So a local cybersecurity club at university got in touch with me and said, "Hey, Mark, would you be interested in coming to talk to some of our students? and put on a workshop. So rather than just a lecture, I wanted to be able to have some hands-on and some things that I could teach them, and then they'd be able to apply it. And the idea of trying to put together enough logs that this could be a lab was daunting. But with this as a kind of driver, as an excuse to do it, I went ahead and wrote some shell scripts in Bash to generate, I think it's about 12 gigs worth of data for sample logs. So I wanted it to be something where the adversary activity would really kind of blend in and not be obvious. So put this together for them, gave a little introduction to talk about what happened, not nearly the detail we just went through, and then spent a little bit of time talking about some of the Unix and Linux commands that you can use to search through text files. One of the things I've found with some of the SOCs I've worked with is that they get daunted. And so what's the great line from the Robin Williams movie? Oh, to struggle against great odds, to face thine enemies undaunted. Sounds to me like you're daunted. Try it again, undaunted. And I wanted to give them the tools of how they could figure this out. And so it was everything from seniors that were a couple weeks away from graduation to I found out one of the students there that was on a team that did very well was actually a high school student from the area that just heard about the cybersecurity club and started attending. So it ended up being a whole lot of fun. So what I'm hoping to do is turn this into a SANS workshop so that people can get that data set or similar data set or maybe a smaller data set and then be able to work through it. And yeah, I'll also be doing it at Queen City Con here in the Cincinnati area. If anyone's interested in doing it at a different conference or having me host it, let me know and we can talk through that as well.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, John. Have a good one.
And there it is, a new entry into the Blueprint episode archive. If you're out there thinking, I like this kind of episode and I want more, or even better, I like this episode and I have an incident story I could tell, I'd love to hear from you. Get in touch via LinkedIn and we can chat about it. In the meantime, if you're looking for SOC training, check out the show notes for links to me and Mark's teaching schedule, as well as everything else from the SANS Cyber Defense curriculum. We've even got some hot new content coming out soon. In fact, we've got even more info on that in the next episode. It's an extra deep and lengthy discussion about Gen AI, the opportunities, explanations of how it works, and where we can use it for security operations with SANS fellow and Sec 511 author Seth Meisner. In fact, that episode is dropping simultaneously with this one, so if you're listening, why not go check it out right now? Again, thank you everyone so much for listening. I'm really excited to be taking the wheel fully on Blueprint now and being able to take it into a new era. Hope you're all as happy as I am that I should be able to bring out even more episodes on a continuous basis. So again, keep those podcast feeds refreshed and watch out for new episodes. You never know when they might show up. Have a great one, and I will catch you on the next episode.